Okay, we are now live on Facebook.
All right. Well,
Oh,
so this is great, as usual. I'm glad that we do this because we're doing the meetings on Thursday evenings and Sunday evenings, but a lot of people are because everything's so crazy, they have time during the day and they don't have time in the evenings because there's
right.
so much other stuff going on.
Yep,
So,
especially with young kids and
yeah.
whatnot.
So I'm really happy to be able to stream this meeting on Facebook.
Yep, me too. So welcome everybody. Doesn't look like we have anybody here through the Zoom format yet, but we are live on Facebook. So I'm Kristen Young. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker in Massachusetts, and I'm the director of clinical services for Herren Project. Do a lot of work with families and individuals struggling with substance use disorder. And Maureen?
I'm the founder of Magnolia New Beginnings. I'm a family recovery coach. I work with families that are supporting somebody struggling with a substance use disorder. Um, yeah.
Awesome. So we are accepting questions right from the get-go. So if you have any questions out there and you are live on Facebook, just put them right in the comment section and we will get them and we will answer them. So how have you been, Maureen?
Good. Was saying that I feel like people are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. January was really difficult for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, but it was just, I don't know, just rough.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to feel like, okay, maybe even if it's not this month, I can see that things are going to start getting, busier and lighter and,
Right.
just because this, for somebody, and I'm sure you feel like this too, but for somebody who spent the majority of my time traveling and training and meeting people and, being out and at different events and stuff,
I
this has
know.
been brutal. Oh my gosh.
It was nice in the beginning because I felt like I could go, oh, and now if I mean, sometimes I am either on the phone or in session or in meetings for 10 hours and I'm literally sitting in the same spot for 10 hours. And I'm like, I barely moved today. Like I have like 230 steps or something. And it's like, holy crap. Like, and I like to move. So
It's
yeah,
been hard. It's been really hard. And I had foot surgery, so I couldn't move. I've actually been in my house since September.
oh my
I
God.
mean, that's not entirely true, but
Right.
it feels true. But I've been really, I mean, I couldn't drive for 2 months after the surgery, and I have to have another one at the end of the month. So I've been in this house so much I can't get I can't I can't get over it.
Right. Oh my gosh, that is a lot. I mean, I feel similar. I do. And in my family, my parents live with me. So both of them have been home and my son is doing so we went from having nobody ever be home with the exception of my mom to everybody being home. So it's
You know, I
overwhelming and I'm sure a
I
lot of
wonder whether it would be better or worse if there was somebody here with me because I'm here by myself
yeah,
and it,
both. It would be both better and worse. I think that's how it's working for most of us.
yeah.
There are definitely times where I'm like, oh, this has been so nice. We've had so much quality time together. And there are other days where I'm like, I just want to be alone. I just want to be by myself.
I don't know what the answer is, but I really hope that things are gonna
Right.
start getting more and more normal.
And for our loved ones who are struggling with substance use disorder in their homes, for our family members, it's even more challenging because, we know that this pandemic has pushed people to use even more than they were and created some new substance use issues in
Yeah.
people that didn't necessarily have that before. So there's lots of people out there that are struggling, lots of relapses. So we see you guys, our hearts and our love are with you. It's definitely a tough time. And we do have somebody that just popped onto the Zoom webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box on your screen. If you're on a tablet or some kind of device, you might need to touch the screen and then it'll pop up and it's the Q&A box that we would like you to put your questions in. If anybody does submit a question, please try to keep it as confidential as possible. Maureen and I will try not to read out names if they happen to be in there, but please be mindful. We don't want to give away too much identifying information to keep people's confidentiality private. So So, but yeah, it's definitely been a tough time. You
Yeah.
know, I think about it though, and I have to remind myself that this is not the first time in history that this has happened. So we feel like the world is ending because our world has never been like this before. But I have to keep reminding myself that the world is not ending, that our world has survived things like this many, many, many times. I mean, with lots of unfortunate loss of lives, which is
Right.
the sad, difficult part of it. But the human race will survive. Most of us will end up being okay.
It's an
And
opportunity to teach resilience to our kids too, which
absolutely.
is, I think, one of the most important things you can teach. Um, because that's how you avoid, grass, that initial reaching for drugs and alcohol to solve problems is
Yep.
to develop that resiliency very young. So I think that it's an opportunity for that if we look at it like that. I don't know about you, but I feel like I spend a lot of time telling other people what to do, and I always find it difficult to take my own advice.
Yes, yes.
So I decided to take my own advice, and I really did the things that I tell other people to do,
Mhm.
and they work.
They do. I know, it's amazing. I was just thinking about that the other day. Like, how many times a day do I tell people that they should really start meditating? And meanwhile, I'm like, oh, I'm starting to get anxious. I feel like I'm overwhelmed. And I'm like, I should be meditating. Right? Like, I need to slow myself down. And I'm telling other people to take the time at the end of the day or the beginning of the day to try to bring that anxiety level down. And it really does help your day. That it's now my work in progress for me is I am
Yeah,
going to start to do some form of meditation daily.
it's interesting, right? And I mean that's a big one, and I started to do that
Mhm.
because I'm always telling people to do that.
Yeah, me
And
too.
some kind of exercise, right? Even if it's just for 15 minutes. And let me tell you, I have like a treadmill downstairs. I have no excuse. So doing that, making a schedule,
Right.
which when you start scheduling your time and really sticking to it, like you're at work, even if you're not at work, or even if you're working from home, it gives some structure to the day. When you
Right.
have no structure and you're all over the place, it feels very overwhelming.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I've started, I made sure I did that, and I build in activities that are interesting or fun, and they don't have to cost anything. There's a lot of stuff out there right now that's either low cost or free.
Mhm.
There's in the Sunday New York Times, in I think it's the home section, they on the first page on the inside, they have something every day, and most of the stuff is free and is all stuff you can do from home. So it might not be everything, might not be interesting, but if you take one or two things and you make like a date with yourself,
Yep.
and that's what I've been doing. So found art classes, which I mean, oh, I can't draw either. It's horrible that the stuff that I'm creating.
But is it fun and do you enjoy it,
So
right?
much
That's
fun,
the
and I
only
totally
question.
forget about what I'm doing. So I've done that. I've done concert, I've done lectures at the 92nd Street Y, and I set it up like I'm going somewhere. I'm going back in this room where it's a lot of the time, but I've been doing stuff like that, and it's really, really been helpful.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I
So
think for me too, my life, the only thing that really changed about my life since the beginning of the pandemic was where I do my work
yeah,
or what form. So I'm pretty much 10-hour days most days of the week. And I have had to get to the point, and I don't know if anyone out there can relate to this, where I've had to be able to take a deep breath and remind myself that I don't have to be perfect. Right? Like that I can miss things. It's okay for me to be overwhelmed, that I have to do the best that I can every single day and actually put time and energy towards that thought. And I know you're a super busy person, so I'm sure you can relate to what I'm saying right now. Put time and effort and energy towards when I feel my anxiety level going up, go, no, it's okay. It's
yeah,
going to be okay. Even if you miss something small, the world won't end, right? Like I do my best to stay as organized as I can, but it's okay if I'm not perfect. It's okay if I make a mistake. Because I think that's something, that a lot of us struggle with.
oh gosh, and I think it's, we all do this. We do this probably on a daily basis in all areas, but really as parent. I
Hmm.
think a lot of we spend a lot of time trying to do everything perfectly, and then when we don't do it perfectly, or if God forbid something happens, where I'd spend a lot of my time telling parents that this is not your fault,
Yeah.
because
Right.
It's, we're not that powerful. If we were that powerful, then we would switch it around and then we would make it all better, but we can't do that either. So I think that that's a really good like message to.
And I do actually use that with my son. I have a 14-year-old son. I'm sure, if many of you are coming back, you've heard me talk about him and my own parenting struggles, because none of us is a perfect parent, no matter how much you think you know. When it comes down to actually parenting your own child, things are a little different. And I have to do that when it comes to him too. When I see that there's a struggle, like right now, his grades are struggling, and I get that anxious feeling like I have to fix this. Like, oh my God, he's going to fail. I have to fix this. And then your mind goes to, he's going to fail forever. I have to do the same thing and take a deep breath and be like, this is his journey. All I can do is be there to support and love him and have discussions with him about what is he doing? What can he be doing better? What is the why, like, why are you struggling right now? Is there anything I can do to help you? But remind myself constantly that this is his journey that
Yeah.
he's going to have to overcome. And I'm just a participant in it. I'm not in control of it.
And we don't want to be, because this is their opportunity to make small mistakes and
Absolutely.
mistakes that don't affect the rest of their lives and recover from them.
Yeah.
And that's where you get that resiliency too, right? I made a mistake. I really screwed up. I fixed it. We want them to be able to do this with.
And now I believe I can overcome,
Oh,
right?
I wish I had, 4 kids. Now I know that. I don't think I always knew that. I did a lot of catching, you know what I mean, before they fell. And I wish I had let them all fall more
Right. And
early.
I do know that while I'm raising my child, Maureen, and am I always able to do that?
No, because yeah, so
So don't beat yourself up about the not knowing too much either, because I feel
yeah.
like
I just,
when
if I
your
could go
heart,
backwards, if I was going to tell my children what to do, like what would you do differently? It would be
right,
a lot around that. About a lot
yeah,
about creating resiliency, a lot about letting them go and
uh,
make
yep,
mistakes early on, things like
yeah.
that I don't think I did.
And you can do this whenever, though. If you're still at home right now and you're struggling with an adult child even, and you're still catching, you can change that behavior at any point. You do have control over it. It's the fear that stops us, because most of the time when I'm working with families, and I'm sure, Maureen, you have a similar experience, when I'm working with families, they feel like if they stop, that's it. It's all over, right? Their loved one is gonna die, possibly. Sometimes that's what comes in their head, or,
Yeah.
they're gonna lose their job and their future is over. But in my experience, the loss of the job is actually what may lead to different choices being made in the future. But when we protect and we keep those consequences from coming, um,
We just drag it out for the
they
most
get
part.
stuck.
I mean, I'm sure somebody has a story where that's not what happened, but for the overwhelmingly, that's what happens.
Right. And this is a great opportunity too. I love to talk about this particular topic. But before I do, what section is it in the New York Times? Somebody is
It's
asking, Maureen.
So it's the Sunday New York Times and it's the home section. And
Okay.
it's just on that, not page 1 of the home section, but I think page 2, that inside page. And they have something every day. If anybody wants to email me, I'm Maureen at Magnolia, C as in Charlie, S as in Sam.com. I got like tons of these things I found of even cooking classes. Like I've done cooking classes with my computer set up, and it's a live cooking class where that you can ask questions too. I mean, they don't see you, thank God. They don't want to see my kitchen, but you can see them. And I did scallion pancakes with this like famous chef. It was so much fun, and it was like $10.
Right.
So I just think that anyway. So if anybody wants to email me and ask me, I got a ton of these.
Okay. Awesome. So what I was thinking about before is the fact that there's a couple different diagnoses when we're talking about substance use disorder. Substance use disorder being the big diagnosis,
Mhm.
right? The one where the consequences are coming and the person is still repeating the same behaviors despite. That's when we know somebody has progressed into substance use disorder. But there are also varying degrees of problem use, which is not necessarily substance use disorder. And I'm saying this because we have to be careful when we hear somebody's story where, I just, you know, really came down on my 17-year-old in the pot smoking and then they just stopped, right? And taking that as advice, because not everybody's in the same boat. So don't think that because it worked for somebody, it's going to work for you, because there are people who just have problem use. I was one of them, right? I definitely had my day, my heyday of partying, when I was younger, and one day went, oof, gosh, I don't think I want to live on $12 an hour for the rest of my life. I'd really like to turn my life around and just stop partying and went to school and got
And
degree.
that's a whole different animal than the
Right.
person that is,
Has substance use disorder.
yeah.
I was maybe genetically protected, maybe we don't know the difference, but my story, if you had seen me when I was, say, 18 years old, you probably would have thought that I was struggling with addiction.
Mhm.
Um, but I just stopped one day. So, including smoking cigarettes, which I had smoked for many years. So, I don't have that real strong, besides food, I don't have that real strong addiction gene or whatever it is. So we have to be careful when we hear stories, and also where somebody is along the line of their journey. We do have something called late stage addiction, which is when it's really taken hold and the brain's really, really, really sick. And there's certain, we talked a little bit about this last time, Maureen, when we were talking about, what's wrong with me? The craft method,
Yeah.
um, and how that typically works really well for people who are maybe in the beginning stages and maybe just problem use, or maybe, dabbling in alcohol, but when people are in late stage addiction, it's just typically not the best approach to take, right? So just being aware that there are different, even diagnoses, for lack of a better word, when it comes to this, and different levels of how sick a person's neurology can be,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Based on the substances they've been using, based on their genetics, based on, a lot of different factors.
Brain chemistry. I mean, it's who
Yep.
knows, you know what I mean? We don't know what it is. If we knew what it was, then they would be able to sort it out nice and neat, but we can't do that.
No. Somebody also just shouted out a codependent no more, which, by the way, if anybody of you out there, which if you're on here, most of you probably do struggle with codependency to some degree. I know I still do. I'm in recovery. I consider myself to be a codependent in recovery, which means I constantly have to be working towards it. But the book Codependent No More by Melanie Beattie, is amazing. It's like the Bible for those of us that struggle with, I'm going to use the old school term because it's what most people understand, but just know I'm saying it with all the love in the world, enabling.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. You know what? Why don't we answer that question, the next question too? But I just wanted to say something about codependency. So, do
Yeah.
you want to explain what craft is?
I think you're better at craft. I've never been trained in craft. So
It's a technique, and I love craft, and I think that it's
I do
very
too.
valuable. It's if you go onto the website alliesinrecovery.net, so it's ALLIES in recovery.net. They have 12 videos that you can watch that kind of show you what the craft method is. And it's basically these videos are meant to help parents. It's awesome. And it's a way of talking, it's a way of dealing with people that are struggling. Very kind, gentle. It was first developed when with women that were trying to get their husbands to stop drinking, and it's evidence-based, but the evidence and the data was collected with this particular group, and their main worry was that the husbands were going to be violent, right? So and the women were completely dependent on the husbands, weren't going anywhere, so they had to figure out how to live with somebody who was using alcohol, excessively. And that's just not where we are anymore. So there's another version of this working with adolescents. So I think that watching those 12 videos, finding different ways of phrasing things, different ways of speaking, and dealing with somebody who's currently not in recovery it's very valuable, and I really like it. But I don't know. I think it needs to be tweaked because we're living in a different world right now. That's kind of my only problem with craft.
Right. And I do think a lot of the approaches that they take, like doing everything with love and trying to be non-judgmental and all of that, is really helpful no matter what stage you're in. Doing that when somebody's been hurting you for a while is also very difficult. So,
And I think too, it almost tries to make the if the family member the therapist, which I don't think the family member should be the therapist. I think they need to if they like the approach, they should find a therapist that's craft trained.
yeah.
And I am, but it just craft informs the way I do things. It's not the only, I also take lots of different things from lots of different places. So I like it, but you have to remember that even if you watch it, you are not a craft therapist. You're still a parent, and that should not be your role, is to like kind of do amateur therapy on your loved one. And I just worry that that does that a little bit. So
It
that's what
also makes them angry. In my experience, when
does.
I'm a therapist, I can do some of these things, but with my own family members, I often get called out on stop therapizing me. You know, they
Yeah,
don't
no, it's true. Yeah, nobody
like it.
likes that. Nobody likes that. What I did want to talk about is, so often parents are told they're enabling and they're codependent and all that. And yes, I mean, that book is great. And if you and if you can pull away from that, you'll both be better off. But I really do think, because somebody had posted in one of the Magnolia groups that they were trying to help their son, and he was extremely depressed and kind of couch surfing, homeless, had just gotten out of jail, was really in trouble. And he wanted to go, and this was out of state. So this was in another state where it's not as easy to get into treatment as it is in Massachusetts, where I am. And she was trying to help him find places. And there were people saying, he's got to do it himself. That the reason why they kind of, a treatment center wants you to call over and over again is because they want you to prove that you really want it. And I was like, my God, that's horrifying to me, because you shouldn't have to do that. I mean, if in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to help them, because it would be like if you had any other thing and you
Yeah,
would go
you
in
show
and
up
say,
and
you
you
know what,
help.
I'm having a heart attack and I need to get into the hospital, and then I'm going to need lots of therapy and lots of treatment afterwards. And you would show up at the hospital and then they would take you in and you would go through the whole process. It's not like that. So if somebody's extremely depressed and may have mental health issues and is addicted to a substance and is homeless, they may not be in the best situation where they can go out and search for these things. So I always worry when we talk about enabling and codependency that people are confused about where they end and the other person begins. But when your child is reaching out to you and saying, Mama, I don't know what to do, can you help me? There's a fine line there. You know what I mean? And I don't think that parents should feel like they can't do that because they need to do it themselves. Otherwise, they don't really want it, and then they're not going to do it. That's not true. If that was the case, my daughter would have never done it.
Right. And I also want to say this is where one area where we at Herren Project can help. So if your loved one is looking for help, I would rather you not have to be the person, because it works better when it's somebody else and you can just provide love and caring and you're not that intimately involved. Your loved one can always reach out to us. All the information is up on our website. And we will help them find treatment. All they have to do is make a phone call. You can even fill an inquiry out for them online, and then they'll receive the phone call.
How
You can
awesome is
sit
that?
with them
That's
and do
beautiful.
that and beside them and give us your phone number and then put them on the phone. We will need to talk to them, but we will be the person that finds the really good vetted treatment facility so you don't have to be. Having said that, I completely agree with Maureen on that.
But that's
No,
what I wound up doing, is I wound up giving her phone numbers,
right.
and she gave them to him, or she called, and or she gave them to him and he called, but they didn't even know where to start. So
Right.
sometimes the level-headed, rational person needs to be the one to make the first call and introduce somebody to those,
Right. Oh,
that.
absolutely. I totally agree. And I think this is one of the things that even I struggle with. When is it? Because the same behavior can be enabling and also not be enabling
Yeah.
under different
Right.
circumstances, right? So
True.
an example of this is, that, and I mean, I'll use you as an example, Maureen, because I know your story, right? Your daughter's actively using, you want her in treatment. So you go and you basically throw her in the back of a car and hold her down and bring her to the treatment center that you found, right?
That's not helpful, in
That's,
case
that's
anybody was
right.
was
That's,
thinking about doing that.
that's codependent. That
That's the definition of codependent.
yeah. So that is not what we want to be doing. So the caveat is, do they want the help, right? So if you're trying to force your loved one to go to treatment, you're doing all the work. That is typically not what leads to health. And I say it that way because I want you to know that it's wasted energy typically to do that,
Right.
right? The
Oh,
second
absolutely.
that they say, I want help, you go to the end of the earth. Okay. That's when I give you all the permission to do
Right.
everything and anything you can to get them into treatment. Right. But that's the difference. So the same behavior can be both codependent and
Yeah.
also healthy and interdependent, depending on
Well,
the circumstances.
and if you look just at my book, right? If you look at that craziness that's, the entertaining and bulk of the book, you know what I mean? It is because there was lots of humor in that book too.
Yes,
That's
it
why
was,
it's
which was
educating.
awesome. That's what made it easier to read because it was a,
Right, because it's a horrible, horrible thing that a lot of people go through. But I tried to make it humorous because look at, even in the moment, it was like, what the hell am I doing? But by the end of it, I do get to the point where I realize that none of that stuff was working. And when she would call me instead, I would say, okay, well, you have the phone numbers. Who are you going to call first? I support you. You can do this. Why, do you need the phone numbers again? Stuff like that. But I did not make the phone calls for her anymore. I didn't do those things. But I did, encourage her and tell her I believed in her fresh, like every day was a new day.
right.
You know what I mean? And it was not easy, but I think that it helped. That part helped. I stopped doing the crazy and started to realize where I ended and she began, but didn't stop helping her and
Yeah,
didn't stop encouraging her and didn't stop loving her.
right.
So I think that there's confusion over that,
I
over,
get I
because
get confused sometimes,
yeah,
Maureen. Like when somebody comes to me, and I'm sure this happens to you sometimes too, or someone comes to me and asks me if they should do something, and I have to stop and really think it through because it's confusing,
yeah,
right? Like you don't always, should you pay the electric bill? Shouldn't you pay the electric bill, right? Like at what point is it helping and at what point is it hurting? It's really, really not black and white. And I know oftentimes when families ask for help or ask questions, there are people out there that make it or try to make it black and white, and families end up walking away feeling awful. And I'm here to tell you, and I know Maureen will agree with this, is it's not that black and white and it's not that easy.
it's not. And for a while, for many years, Magnolia raised money for sober living. We haven't been doing any since the pandemic because donations are so down. So lacking. But what a lot of parents, and we had to be very careful about who we gave them out to. So we wound up working with mostly Department of Corrections and drug court and mass health facilities because I would be able to get somebody who was having like this two steps back view of whether this person had help or not. But a lot of times the parents would say, you figure it out this time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this was the time that they shouldn't have been saying that. Maybe that sober living is going to be the thing that makes the difference. But now they've stepped away because somebody told them that's enabling. Well, where were they supposed to live? I mean, sometimes it's not enabling. And you may not be able to do it. You may not be able to afford it, and that's different. But this continuing trying is what we want them to do. Nobody wants to keep going through this over and over again, but there's no place to go if you won't, aside from sober living sometimes. And if they go back to the street, they're not going to be able to maintain this sobriety. So it's a fine line.
And this is one of the reasons why I always recommend you don't, unless it's absolutely 100% necessary, you don't allow your loved one to live with you, especially while they're actively using,
Yeah,
because it's impossible to do what Maureen is saying right now when you are the warden of their addiction. And that's my term. It's
I
always going
love
to
that.
be my
I love
term
that. Yeah.
because you will get burnt out, you will get angry. You
How could you
will
not?
you will want to say, I'm done, get out, I never want to see you again. And that's valid. When you've been living in a war zone like that for as long as you have, it's valid that you're going to get there. So for your own self-preservation and for the protection of the relationship, which by the way is way more important in terms of getting your loved one help than them living in your home. Um, you really got to work towards, and they're always going to say, I hate sober living. I've yet to hear anyone who's actively using that doesn't have a laundry list of reasons why sober living sucks. Um, then that's their choice because you're still helping them. potentially find a place to live and they're choosing not to. And then it's up to them to figure out where they're going to stay, because staying
Yeah,
with you,
but you're giving them an option at
right,
least.
you're not just kicking them out to the streets and saying you can't go anywhere. And always the best time to do this is when they're coming out of treatment too. It's really hard to do if they're living in your house to say, just get out. It's much easier to say you can't come back.
Or an in between, that never works either. You know, oh, until like until you find something, you can stay here. It's best to just do it from one place to the other.
Right.
You know, there are families that they either can't afford it, or they feel like very strongly that they want their loved one under the same roof. I think it's really important for, in that case, for somebody to work really hard while the person is in treatment on their own recovery, and looking at issues with codependency, because we can, as parents, somebody can be doing great and we can screw them up in about 10 seconds when they come home. And I know I could do that. I had that power. I didn't have a lot of power, but I can mess her up really quickly.
And as an ex-wife, I can tell you, me too.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, the second that I got triggered, the words that would come out of my mouth were not conducive towards any kind of recovery on his side, because I was angry and resentful. And that was from years of staying in something that was hurting me. Right.
Yeah.
So I had to do my own work there. And
And you can't do that work on yourself when it's harder to do that work on yourself when you're in the middle of it, you know?
Yeah.
So I always told my daughter, you go to sober living for 6 months and then you can come home, because she wanted to come home. And during that 6 months, I would suggest that the family works really hard on their own recovery. I would probably say a year now. In retrospect, it should have been a year. But this is not nothing. You know what I mean? We want to treat it like it's a bump in the road, but it's not. It's a disease, and it has huge impacts on every single part of everybody's life that's involved with that's involved. So there's no reason to think that you wouldn't have to work really hard on this. And I have a lot of families that say, well, why should I have to work so hard? It's their problem. Well, because you love them, and because you're a family unit, and because it's also impacted you. Right?
And that's why there's a book like Codependent No More.
Absolutely.
It's written for us, about us, to help us recover from one of the most horrific things that you can go through with somebody that you love.
And there's a workbook now too, right? I would get up and show people the book, but I have my pajama pants on the bottom.
That's awesome.
So I'm not going to do that.
I love how you just admitted that. There's actually a bunch of them too. She's created codependency books for different subjects too. So it's not just related to substance use disorder anymore. Because I mean, one of the things I think that we have started to recognize is that codependency is actually a normal thing that happens whenever you have a sick loved one. So, but in other illnesses, the codependency is actually healthy. So if I have a loved one who's sick with cancer and they need me to take them to appointments and to change their bed sheets and to do their laundry and to feed them and to do all of those things, right? That is a normal reaction. They need that. Right. So the codependency that develops is actually more of like a symbiosis, right? It's a symbiotic relationship where you need each other in order for this person to move forward. Unfortunately, in the illness of substance use disorder, it just doesn't work in the same way. We do the same things because we know they're sick, right? So we do a lot of the same behaviors, but it actually makes the person less well. It doesn't actually help them get better.
And it makes us sick.
And it makes us sick. Oh, absolutely. Yep. But really sick.
Yeah.
Yep. That's hard. And I've heard that statement so many times. Why would I concentrate on me? Right. And both Maureen and I are living examples of why.
Yeah. When I started to do that, she got well.
Yeah.
And that's not a coincidence. I mean, she started to move towards wellness, I should say. Because
same here. Divorce was the best thing that ever happened to my ex-husband. So, it definitely.
Wouldn't it be awesome to do it before that though, right?
I always talk about that. And when I work with couples, I say this all the time too, because what this disease does is it's a love killer, right? I mean, it's really, when you're a parent, that's a different thing because we typically love our children regardless. We also hate them sometimes too, especially when they're using, right? But I think it's easier to stay in there than it is when you're a spouse and there's more of a choice.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't know my ex-husband when he couldn't use a fork, right? So it was never my responsibility to keep him alive. I met him, he was a full-grown man and could feed and bathe and care for himself. So, you know, that's the added piece that I think parents deal with, is that it takes you feel responsible for this person's life, which you don't. It does kind of start to happen though, at least in my case, it did start to happen where I felt responsible for his life.
Yeah.
The codependency, that's the sickness, right? So here's a grown man who is fully capable, very intelligent, and I was fully convinced that if I didn't exist, he would die, right? That was my illness. That was where I started to become very, very unwell. And in that, I stayed in there much longer than I should have. I didn't put up enough boundaries. There was a lot of arguing. I became somebody that I didn't even recognize. And by the time I decided I wanted to leave, I hated him.
Yeah.
Now, had I left years before, or had I had better boundaries years before and didn't let his illness take me so far down, I don't know what would have happened to us. You know, I can't say, but I can say for the people that truly have love, where you had a real loving relationship before the illness hit, don't wait until you hate them to leave, because there's no turning back at that point. There really isn't. When you hate somebody so much, and I'm using that word because that's how I felt at the time. I don't feel that way now, but at the time I did. I couldn't even sit next to him on a couch. I didn't want to be in the same room with him. Everything about him made me angry and repulsed and depressed. And you don't want to wait that long, because I think a lot of relationships can be saved if we're able to put our boundaries up a lot sooner,
Right.
and they move towards recovery sooner too. And we're not there picking up all the pieces. I was the person. I found every treatment center on the planet. I knew every Suboxone clinic. I knew all of it. I did all the work, right? But it didn't work until he wanted it.
Or until you stopped wanting it more, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we were using my story, it wasn't until I left
Mhm.
that he really wanted it, you know, and he turned everything around. And my story is exactly that. I left. I was finally serious. He knew I was serious. He did everything and anything he could to become sober and become the man I always wanted him to be. I moved back in, and there was no love left. So when I left him for the second time, it was heartbreaking, because he was like, I don't understand. I'm doing everything you always wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And my answer was, I don't understand either. It just
Yeah.
is what it is. I'm
So
not
we
in
just need to get there before that happens. And
exactly.
it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that, but that's making it about us instead of making it about what's right and what you need to do. And not that you need to leave, but you need to have boundaries. You need to work on yourself. That's
Right.
what the self-care and the working and educating yourself works happens.
And in the case of relationships, of marriages or any kind of relationship, I do think separations are very, very, very helpful to save relationships. I'm not talking about leaving for good. You don't have to leave knowing you're getting a divorce. We have this idea in our head that we have to absolutely know the answer, but we don't. A separation can be very helpful for you to get some clarity. So if you financially, obviously there's financial constraints for a lot of families, which was my case. But if you can separate, take some time apart. Don't make any decisions about anything. Just take
Because
some
you don't
time.
know what could happen.
Exactly. And let them wonder about you. Let them miss you a little bit. Let them decide how much you mean to them. You know, I mean, let them have some space as well. Because we do become, I love when you said earlier, Maureen, to know where I end and you begin. Like, that is the struggle
And
for
it's
all.
interesting how, when you are afraid to let go of somebody, even just for a little bit, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong. So if you can't do that, if you can't step away from each other without fear of the other person's going to go totally, off the wall, or whatever, something's really wrong. Something really needs to be fixed, and you should do it then. That's the exact reason you should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always say, when people say, how do you know the difference? In very simplistic terms, are you doing something for somebody that they are actually capable of doing themselves? And that gets great, because we often decide they're not capable when they're actually capable. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if your loved one has been able to finance a very, very expensive habit, right? And manage to get places to get drugs without a car, and make all kinds of things happen when it comes to the drug of choice, then they're actually way more capable than you're giving them credit for. They can call a treatment center for the most part. Okay. I'm not talking about late stage when everything starts to fall apart and they can't put anything together, right? That's different. But if your loved one is still getting things done, right, then they're capable of sitting beside you and making a phone call.
Right. And they're
Right.
also capable of manipulating you into thinking that they can't live without you, so that you continue to do things for them, which makes them sicker. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's every person that's in long-term recovery that I ask always says, I wish my wife, sister, mother, brother, whoever it was, had stopped sooner.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
I
Not
wish
that it's
I had
ever our
stopped
fault.
sooner. Yep. No, when I look back, I wish I had gotten there sooner. And I do. And that does not mean withholding love.
No.
Right. And I think that's where craft comes in. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what the message is, but whatever way you want to do it, whether you want to look at that website, you want to look at the videos, or whether you just want to keep that in mind, that doesn't mean that I don't tell you I love you very much, but I can't do that for you. I need you to do that for yourself.
Right. I'd love it if we had some questions. Anybody we've covered some pretty heavy topics here. Oh, we got one. You want to read it,
Boy,
Maureen?
it'd be that nice. All you had to do was ask.
I know.
Okay. I met him while actively using. I have been with him through rehab and recovery. I was definitely codependent up until a few months ago. He was thriving, but once I set my boundaries, he seemed to spiral emotionally and mentally. He didn't start using again, but I think I found other unhealthy ways to make up. He found other unhealthy ways to make up for my absence. I have learned that I need to walk away from my own sanity. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, it's so hard. I know, and I can understand exactly what you're saying. One of the things that can be helpful for our loved ones is, if we need to step away, is being very vocal and verbal about why. If we're setting a boundary, give them as much lead time as possible, that this is what I'm going to do from now on, because they can feel abandoned when we walk away. And I am by no means saying that's your fault. It is not your fault. If you have to walk away, you walk away whatever way you need to in order to better yourself, and keep yourself alive and thriving. But just to throw it out there, we do need to set boundaries, but they can feel abandoned. And I think that might be what's happening with your spouse. So if you're still in contact with him and you're still having conversation, you might just want to let him know what it was doing to you, if you haven't already, and that you didn't walk away because you don't care about him. You walked away because you care more about yourself.
Yeah.
Than to allow yourself to stay in a situation like that. Again, not your fault, but the more verbal and vocal, I always suggest to families, if you're going to set a boundary, tell them that you're going to set the boundary before you actually need to set the boundary, if you can.
I think that's really important. Yeah, because you don't want to, it's not really fair to have been doing things and then all of a sudden spring something like that on somebody. So I was just checking to see if we have any questions in Facebook, which people can also ask questions on Facebook. And we have some people watching, but we don't have any questions.
Okay. Well, we're here for questions, you guys. If you have any, please shoot them our way. That's what we're here for. But yeah, that's a hard one, because what I feel like, what I was really good at when I was in the grips of all of this was setting an angry boundary right in the middle of something and then never following through on it. I was like a pro.
So yeah. I always tell people, you know what, mean it. If you're going to say it, you better mean it.
Yeah.
Because I know the angry boundary.
Angry boundary, right?
Yeah, you're out if you do that again.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
My favorite was
again, and you're like, well, next time you're out for sure.
My favorite is when we say I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
They don't, by the way, I've talked to the other side, to a lot of people who struggled, and they don't know what that means, and they start to just ignore it. It's like, what
Oh
is I'm
yeah, it's
done?
just like the peanuts, blah, 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 you know, the teacher, because that's we
Right.
nothing that then nothing. You're teaching them that nothing you say means anything when you do stuff like that.
Yep. So the way that this should work is trying to have forethought, which is where therapy for you, group work, in groups, where you can start to think about the things that come up often, the
Mhm.
things that you do, but you get a pit in your stomach when you do them because you really know you shouldn't be doing them, or you're angry while you're doing them, right?
Yeah.
Um, those are the things that you really should set a boundary around. And then deciding that, okay, I've paid his rent for the past 2 months, and I know he's going to come back and ask me. I know he is. How do I say no? Knowing that he might lose his apartment too, right? That's the hard part. But I don't have any money left, right? These are the situations I see families in frequently.
How
Um,
many families have you seen that lose their homes trying
mhm.
to pay for treatment and everything else and lawyers and all these other things? I can think one person I know off the top of my head just comes to immediately to mind. And unfortunately, she lost her son eventually. You know, it was all that trying to fix, trying to fix, trying to fix. And it, you know, there was you know, with all the best intentions, but
Yep.
they wound up without a home.
Right. Yeah. And I do see that happen frequently. I've also seen families remortgage houses or spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on treatment, and they finally are like, we can't pay anymore. And again, try to tell your loved one this before. So then obviously you can help them get into detox, and you can advocate for them to stay in treatment, whatever is available in your state, right? But you can't pay anymore. And oftentimes that's when the loved one actually does it, because they have now reached out for help, and it might be state facility. It might be an awful state facility. And that's when they end up sober. I've seen that happen so many times. They end up in long-term recovery, and the families are like, we spent hundreds of $1,000s on treatment, and they did it in the state-run facility. Like, by the way, it doesn't mean all the other treatment was useless either, because it stays with them.
No,
They,
because yeah, definitely.
but when somebody really decides they want to be in recovery, it doesn't matter where you send them.
Right.
Typically they
And
do it.
I've also seen people try to give their child the best, right? Their loved one the best. And they go to, you know, they pay out of pocket because the insurance doesn't even cover it. And they go from like this nice treatment center. I have one person who then went to some kind of a retreat and spent a couple of months there, all of this costing a fortune. And these were like upper middle class people. And they did all of this. And then when the person had to come back into the real world, that's when they fell apart, because that's where they were having the problems. So sometimes the treatment is not always the answer. It's a good structured living environment where you can go out into the world, get a job, do the things that everybody has to do eventually, and then come back and be supported by other people that are going through the same thing. That sometimes all of this, like taking you away from taking, over and over and over again, and then making it for as long a period of time that you don't have to really confront the real world, is not the answer for a lot of people either.
Right. Eventually you have to figure out how you're going to manage life without the substance, without your coping strategy. You can't retire into treatment for the rest of your life. I mean, I would have retired into the education system for the rest of my life if I could have, but eventually you got to get to work, and it's kind of the same thing, right? In a way, it's like eventually you got to take the skills you've learned and put them into action in order to really create a happy life.
Yes, totally.
We have a question. My daughter lives away at college. Her friend has been depressed, abusing alcohol and drugs. He began hurting himself this past weekend. Her friend group tried to subdue him, then called ambulance to take him for psychoval. His family does not engage or help. It's a lot of stress for my daughter and her friends as they feel responsible for him. Any advice? Um, yes. First of all, buy her the book, The Codependent No More, and have her read it. That will help. That gives a lot of advice on how to figure out where I end and someone else begins. Um, Second of all, I would say for them not to try to save or fix him, to try the best that they can to love him and tell them they love him and continue to call 911 when his behaviors are scary or risky in any way. If they start to become unwell because of his unwellness, they have to step away. Okay. You cannot allow somebody else to make you sick. Obviously, telling him he needs to get help. But I do this in my personal life too. If one of my friends is starting to put all of their stuff on me and being a good codependent, I used to always take it right on and be right in there with them until all of a sudden I couldn't anymore, which is why I ended up with shingles at the age of 14, right? It's not good for us. We can't own other people's stuff. So give her permission not to have to save him. There's only one person in that scenario that can save him, and that's himself. And that's reaching out for help, not help from, other teenagers or older young adults.
What do you think about talking to health services in the college?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no confidentiality there. They should never try to keep a secret ever. Yeah, I would definitely let the college know if she can, go down to health services, let them know.
And he may be mad about that, but who cares? This is not, this is serious.
When I have some of the teenagers that I work with that go through this with friends, and they say that, well, I don't want to tell on them. I'm always like, well, would you rather have to spend the rest of your life wishing you had, or would you rather have them be mad at you and able to be mad at you forever, right? Like that's the choice we often have to make is I don't want to ever wish that I had told somebody. I would rather have somebody be angry with me and be alive and angry.
I think sometimes, a lot of times at college, people, a lot of their activities revolve around drinking and smoking and things like that. We don't like to think about that as parents. And maybe that could be true. Maybe it's not true. But maybe it might be good to do some things, like purposely do some things that don't include that for that friend group.
Yeah.
If, so that this way he'll be more comfortable. I don't mean like go out to the place you always do and no one drinks, but more like, try to figure out a hike or some other activity that we can do now. And I don't know what that is, that does not include that, and that you can have fun together, and he's not going to lose his whole friend group if he's the only one that, is abstaining.
Yep. And here's a question that I love this question. How long does the manipulation aspect of an addict's personality continue after recovery? Yeah.
Sometimes forever.
Yeah. It depends on what they're doing for recovery. You can
depends on if it works. That's what I think. It depends on if you allow yourself to be manipulated, it will last forever.
It's true. Very true. Yep.
Because if they go off and they come back and they're well and they're in recovery and they can still use those techniques, they will. It's just kind of some people, it's just a personality thing, right? And that's why we have to work on ourselves too.
And let's think about this though. When we talk about addiction, right? Substance use disorder, there's a very neurological, there's a very biological component to it, but overall it's a behavioral disease, right? They're using a substance to manage their difficult emotions, and in that they're manipulating to keep that going. The behaviors are a big problem, and those behaviors will persist even after somebody's in recovery. Hopefully within years of working on themselves, that you see them really start to diminish and they start to be more aware. This is what AA does. It teaches them how to become more aware of themselves. But like Maureen said, the only way for you to stop being affected by it is for you to work on you and really set some boundaries.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's where post-acute withdrawal too. We have to, like as a family member, as a loved one, look into post-acute withdrawal syndrome, see what it looks like, see that this is not something, even the early stages of recovery, and I say the first year of recovery, a person is changing all of the time. They're going through lots of change. Their brain chemistry is going back, hopefully, to normal, and they're becoming themselves again, with all of the trauma that they've experienced while they were using. And so it takes time, and hopefully everybody's in, some kind of a therapy. It's not just, I don't care what anybody says, a community of people is so important. A 12-step program, you need therapy too, because nobody that gets to that point where they need to go to detox and rehab and go to meetings and all that hasn't experienced trauma. It's, you know, so it's, I think it's really important to find somebody that understands addiction and understands trauma.
Right. And that's for both the woman or the man asking the question, the family member, and for the person in recovery. I
Absolutely.
also want to just, piggyback onto that, but you can't make your loved one go to therapy. Please know that. You can plant the seed. As a therapist, I frequently have family members that force their loved ones to come to therapy. And if the person doesn't want to be there, even if they show up in the room, there's not going to be any work being done. So, you got to also kind of take a step back and suggest it. And then that's another area where you can set your boundaries. If you're
Yeah,
seeing
right.
behaviors that are affecting you negatively, you can say, hey, listen, you got to get into therapy, or I can't do this with you right now. And this goes for that gentleman that, the woman who was talking about her daughter, and the individual that was struggling,
Mhm.
right? I can't safely have you in my life right now. Like, you got to do some work on yourself. So I need you to go to therapy if I'm going to be in this with you.
That was one of the things I agreed to pay for.
Right.
You know, because it was ridiculous. By the time, she would have been able to get one through her insurance, through the Mass Health and all the other kind of stuff, it would have never happened. So, and she would have had 3 sessions too, probably. That was one of the things I agreed to pay for.
Right. And that's another thing I'm going to throw out there to you guys too. It's a broken system right now. I mean, including myself, every therapist I know is booked. So you can't get in to see a therapist. Some people, the wait list can be 6 months, which is not okay. And it's an insurance, a lot of it's an insurance company issue, because they're not allowing people to get on their panels, even though there aren't a lot of therapists. So there's some major issues. There's a place right now called Pursue Care, in case anybody's interested, that's just starting up. It's, sort of more of, it's like a virtual clinic per se, where they have doctors, prescribers, clinicians, and I'm not sure what else, but there's a couple different things that they offer through there. You can get psych meds, you can get
And what was it
therapy.
called?
Pursue Care.
Pursue.
Yep. They're not in every state yet, but they're trying to get there. And like I said, they're taking advantage of the virtual clinics, and they're taking state insurance. So it's covered, and it's making it easier for people to have access to the treatment and the therapy that they need, and even the medications that they need. So
I think this is some of the stuff that's is gonna stay, after COVID. And it's gonna be, we have to take the good out of this too, even though it's been horrible. And I think that this is one of the good things that we're gonna be left with, is that there's gonna be more access
Yep.
to all those kinds of things, because we've gotten used to doing it like this. Like, I would never go into a doctor again for a small thing. Why would I do that? I would just have a televisit.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's going to stick, and I love it. The only issue that we're having is, in my line of work, is that you can't see anybody out of state. So technically, if I'm doing a virtual visit with somebody and they are on vacation in New Hampshire and I'm in Massachusetts, I'm only licensed in Massachusetts. So
Oh, I never
I'm
thought of
hoping that I'm hoping they're going to change that. So just so everyone's aware out there, I've had a lot of people reaching out to me, asking me if I can take them or their loved ones. And I can't, if I'm not taking anybody anyways right now, but we can't as therapists take somebody over state lines, which doesn't make sense. I feel like it would make way more sense to open that up so we can get more access out
Maybe
there.
that will happen with
I think
this, you
they're
know what I
working
mean?
on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think they're working on it. So, okay, well, this was awesome as usual.
It's always good. And this will exist and live on the Magnolia Addiction Support page. So
Yep.
people can, and if you are watching this after the live and you want to put questions in there, they will be answered. I can, either one of us will answer them, definitely.
Absolutely.
All right.
And this will also be up on the Herren Project YouTube page and YouTube channel. And I think it also goes up on our website. So you can access it after the fact as well, up there. So,
All right. Good
and
stuff.
we're here the first Tuesday of every month at noon.
It was
That's
good
it.
seeing you.
Yeah, good seeing you too, Maureen.
All
I'll
right.
talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye-bye.